people are consistently amazed by their own capacity for self-deception. It's a remarkable phenomenon, really. You have these individuals who spend weeks, sometimes months, crafting this intricate web of lies, rehearsing their sob stories in front of the bathroom mirror, and convinced that once they step into my courtroom, they'll have me eating out of the palm of their hand. They don't seem to realize that I've heard every version of the "I'm just a victim of circumstance" narrative that has ever been uttered in human history. Today, the person standing before me with that wide-eyed, innocent-looking facade was a young man named Jason Thorne, and he was currently engaged in the biggest mistake of his life. The plaintiff was his former roommate, a sensible woman named Elena Rodriguez. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She was clutching a stack of bank statements and lease agreements, her knuckles white, her posture rigid with the kind of controlled fury that only comes from being burned by someone you actually trusted. She was suing Mr. Thorne for $3,000 in unpaid rent and utilities. Mr. Thorne, on the other hand, was wearing a leather jacket that cost more than my first car, looking entirely too comfortable, leaning against the defendant's podium as if he were holding court at a trendy coffee shop. "Mr. Thorne," I began, my voice cutting through the silence of the courtroom like a razor, "I see you've chosen the casual, arrogant look for your day in court. Stand up straight. You are not in your living room, and you are certainly not among friends. You are here to answer for your financial obligations. Do you understand?" He gave me a slow, languid shrug. "Your Honor, this is all just a misunderstanding. Elena is incredibly high-strung, and she's blowing this way out of proportion because I had a few bad months at work. It's not like I didn't pay anything. I just wasn't able to meet the full amount immediately." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, tasting the word and finding it profoundly bitter. "I see a lot of misunderstandings in this room, Mr. Thorne. Usually they involve a bank account, a signed contract, and someone who thinks the rules of adult life don't apply to them. Let's look at the facts. You signed a lease. You agreed to pay half the rent. Did you or did you not fulfill that obligation?" "I intended to," he exclaimed, his voice rising with that characteristic whiny indignation. But then my freelance design project fell through, and I had to prioritize my equipment upgrades because without that gear, I can't make money. Elena understood that. She told me it was fine. I looked over at Elena. Her eyes were flashing with genuine disbelief. "Judge, that is a complete lie. He never mentioned an equipment upgrade. He told me he was out of town visiting his sick mother. I found out later through social media that he was actually at a music festival in California while I was covering his share of the rent." I shifted my gaze back to the defendant. His face didn't change color. He had that practiced, sociopathic stillness that usually signals a seasoned liar. "A music festival, Mr. Thorne? Is that part of your professional development? Is loud music and overpriced beer considered industry research in your field?" He stammered for a second, his composure wavering just a fraction. That was a weekend trip. I needed to network. It's how you get clients in my industry. Elena is just jealous that she has a boring 9-to-5 job and I'm out there making connections. "Oh, the hustler defense," I said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping my throat. "It's a classic. Every deadbeat with a laptop and an ego uses this one. You're not networking, sir. You're spending money that doesn't belong to you on experiences you haven't earned." And then you have the audacity to look at this woman who worked double shifts to keep a roof over your head and call her jealouses. I picked up the lease agreement and tossed it onto the desk. It was a perfectly valid, legally binding document. You signed this on the 1st of the year. You were obligated to pay $1,500 a month. Elena paid your share for 3 months while you were networking at festivals and upgrading your equipment. That is not a misunderstanding. That is theft. "It's not theft if I plan to pay her back," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I have a contract coming up next month. I told her I would pay her back with interest." "I don't care about your hypothetical contracts," I snapped, leaning into the microphone until my voice filled every corner of the room. "I care about the money you already took. You don't get to gamble with someone else's livelihood and call it a plan. You took her money. You lied to her about where you were, and now you're standing in my courtroom trying to tell me that she should be grateful you didn't leave her with even more debt. He looked around the room, his eyes darting toward the cameras, clearly hoping the lens would catch him looking like a misunderstood visionary. He didn't seem to realize that the cameras were documenting exactly what a pathetic, entitled parasite looks like. I am an artist, Judge, he said, trying a different, more somber tone. Artists have erratic income. It's the nature of the beast. You can't hold a creative person to the same standards as a clerk. I am holding you to the standard of a human being, I retorted. And in the world of human beings, when you borrow money, you pay it back. When you sign a contract, you honor it. And when you screw over the person who is paying your rent, you don't call them high-strung. You say thank you, and you find a way to make it right. You are not an artist, Mr. Thorne. You are a mooch, and mooching is not a profession. He finally looked rattled. The air of superiority was leaking out of him, like air from a punctured tire. He shifted his weight, his hands beginning to shake slightly as he reached for the podium. This is unfair, he muttered. You're making me out to be a villain just because I'm struggling to get my career off the ground. I'm not making you out to be anything, I said, my voice dropping to that icy, calm tone that always signals the end of the argument. The evidence is making you out to be a deadbeat. You brought this on yourself. You brought this lawsuit on yourself. And now you are going to pay the price. But before we get to the judgment, I want to see the records of these freelance projects you claim to have been working on. If you want me to believe that your money went into your career, show me the invoices. Show me the payments. Show me something other than your own hot air. He blinked, clearly not expecting me to call his bluff so early in the proceedings. He reached into the inner pocket of that ridiculously expensive leather jacket and pulled out a single crumpled sheet of paper. He unfolded it with the kind of performative grandiosity you'd expect from someone presenting a winning lottery ticket. I didn't even need to look at it to know it was garbage. This, he said, holding the paper up like it was a holy relic, is the ledger of my projected earnings for the next 6 months. It shows the scope of my current contracts and the payment milestones I'm expecting to hit. It proves that I have professional viability, Your Honor. I didn't take the paper. I just stared at it, letting the silence grow until the courtroom felt like a pressure cooker. Projected earnings, I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. Are you serious? You expect me to use projected earnings to pay off a very real, very past due rent debt? I could project that I'm the Queen of England, Mr. Thorne, but that doesn't mean I have a palace to live in. Elena let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. I didn't blame her. Judge, that paper is a printout of a spreadsheet he made last night. I saw him typing it on his laptop at 3 a.m. It's entirely fabricated. I turned my gaze to Mr. Thorne. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. He realized that the game was fundamentally broken. Mr. Thorne, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Are you trying to present a fraudulent document to this court? Do you have any idea of the legal consequences of perjury, or are you too busy networking to pay attention to the law? It's not fraudulent, he insisted, his voice rising again. It's a professional assessment of my business trajectory. Anyone who understands the tech and design industry knows that these projections are standard practice for securing funding and managing assets. This is not a bank, and I am not an investor, I snapped, slamming my hand on the desk. This is a court of law, and you are a defendant in a breach of contract lawsuit. I don't care about your projections. I care about your obligations. You owed rent. You didn't pay it. You fabricated a story about your mother to justify your absence, and you used the money you owed for rent to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford. You are a liar, Mr. Thorne, and frankly, you're not even a good one. He looked like he'd been slapped. The mask was slipping, and beneath it was just a scared, entitled little boy who had finally run out of people to manipulate. He tried to puff out his chest, but it looked pathetic. You're just biased against me because you're old. You don't understand the gig economy. You don't understand how hard it is to make it in the real world. I leaned forward until my face was only inches from the microphone. I have navigated more professional environments than you will see in 10 lifetimes, sir. I have seen every type of parasite that tries to feed off the hard work of others. You are not a gig economy victim. You are a deadbeat. And the real world you're talking about, it's a place where you earn what you get. You haven't earned a damn thing. You just took it. I turned to Elena. Miss Rodriguez, I want you to tell me exactly how many times he promised to pay you back and exactly what excuses he gave you each time. Let's put this on the record, nice and slow, so Mr. Thorne can hear the sound of his own dishonesty. Elena took a deep breath, her hands steadying. The first month, he said the check was delayed in the mail. The second month, he said his bank account had been hacked. The third month, he told me he was waiting for a massive commission from a global brand, but the deal was stalled because of an international regulatory issue. Every single time, I believed him. Every single time, I covered for him because I didn't want him to get evicted. And yet, I said, looking back at Thorne, you were at a music festival, you had enough money for a ticket, for travel, for alcohol, but you didn't have the money for your share of the rent. Is that the international regulatory issue you were referring to? He went deathly silent. He couldn't spin his way out of that one. The facts were right there, cold and unyielding. I had a sponsor, he mumbled, staring at his shoes. The ticket was complimentary. Oh, a sponsor, I chuckled. A sharp biting sound. What? The festival was sponsoring your delinquency? Did they have a booth for how to scam your roommate? You're mocking me, he yelled, finally snapping. He slammed his hands down on the podium. This whole thing is a joke. She knew I was struggling. She knew the risks of living with an artist. She shouldn't be here. She is here, I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy calm, because you didn't pay your debts. And now you are going to listen very carefully. You are going to stop shouting, you are going to stop making excuses, and you are going to prepare yourself for the judgment. Because I have heard enough. I have seen the lease. I have seen the bank records. I have seen the evidence of your trips. And I have seen the absolute contempt you have for the person who kept a roof over your head. You are finished, Mr. Thorne. Oh, I'm just getting started, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, letting the silence in the courtroom stretch until he looked like he was about to jump out of his own skin. He had spent his entire life floating on the surface of his own ego, and today I was dragging him down to the bottom of the ocean of reality. Mr. Thorne, do you honestly believe that because you call yourself an artist or a freelance visionary, that the common laws of contract and honesty simply don't apply to you? That you're some sort of enlightened soul who exists above the drudgery of paying for electricity and rent? He opened his mouth, probably to vomit another stream of self-righteous garbage, but I didn't give him the floor. Save it, I barked. I've had enough of the misunderstood genius's routine. It's tired. It's pathetic. And more importantly, it's expensive for people like Miss Rodriguez. She paid for your heat. She paid for your internet so you could stream your music festivals. And she paid for your dignity, which you seem to have pawned a long time ago. I turned to the plaintiff. Miss Rodriguez, I want to see the messages where he explicitly stated he would pay you back. The ones from the third month. The one about the Global Brand Commission. Let's see the exact wording. Elena reached into her folder and pulled out a stack of printouts. She handed them to Bird, who walked them over to my bench. I didn't need my glasses to see what was written there. It was all in black and white, a digital paper trail of lies. I read one out loud, my voice echoing with a mocking cadence. Hey, Elena, the international brand deal hit a snag with the customs office, but I've got the deposit coming in tomorrow for sure. The commission is 6 figures. You'll have your share by Friday, plus a little extra for the trouble. Signed, Jason. I looked up from the papers, my eyes locking onto his. 6 figures? A global brand? Tell me, Mr. Thorne, what was the name of this illustrious international brand? Was it a multinational conglomerate? Or was it a lemonade stand you thought you could trick into hiring you? He shrank back, looking like a teenager caught lying about his homework. It was an NDA-protected project, Your Honor. I can't disclose the specifics of my client's business. Of course, I said, a dry, sharp laugh escaping my lips. The non-disclosure agreement defense, the absolute last refuge of the professional scoundrel. You can't tell me who paid you because nobody paid you. You're a fraud, Jason. A transparent, lazy, entitled fraud. I am not a fraud, he screamed, his face turning a deep, splotchy purple. I am trying to make something of myself. You don't know the pressure I'm under. You don't know what it's like to try to survive in this city without a trust fund. Survive? I thundered, my voice rising to a level that made the gallery jump. You weren't surviving. You were feasting on someone else's hard work. You didn't struggle. You exploited. You took a person who trusted you, who treated you like a partner, and you treated her like a convenience store that never closes and never asks for payment. I leaned across the desk, pointing my pen right at his nose. And you know what the best part is? The best part is that you think you're the smartest person in this room. You thought you could come in here, flash a leather jacket, tell a few tall tales about global brands, and have me side with you because you're creative. Well, guess what? In this room, honesty is the only currency that matters. And you are bankrupt. He was panting now, his chest heaving, the facade completely shattered. He looked around the courtroom, realizing that no one, not the bailiff, not the audience, not the judge, was buying his act. I want to see the bank statements from the 3 months you were living there, I said, my voice ice cold. I want to see exactly how much money you spent on upgrades and travel while you were telling Miss Rodriguez that you couldn't pay your rent. Pull him out, Mr. Thorne, right now. He hesitated, his hands trembling as he reached into his bag. He pulled out a tablet, fumbling with the screen. I want the statements, not the screen. I corrected. I want the hard copies. If you didn't print them, you're going to be here for a very long time while we wait for you to do it. He looked at me, his eyes wide with genuine, unadulterated panic. I don't have them with me. How convenient, I remarked, a thin, cruel smile playing on my lips. You have a tablet to show me projections, but you don't have a record of the money you actually spent. That's a funny little coincidence, isn't it? It's almost as if you knew exactly what those statements would prove, and you decided it was better to forget them than to let the truth come out. He stood there, mute, a picture of absolute defeat. The arrogance had been stripped away, replaced by the shivering realization that he was about to be held fully, legally, and publicly accountable for every single lie he had told. Bird, I said, not taking my eyes off the defendant. I think we've seen enough of Mr. Thorne's creative financial management. What do you think? Bird stepped toward the podium, a massive, immovable force of justice. I think he's done, Judge. I think you're right, I said, tapping my pen on the judgment form. Mr. Thorne, the artist, has left the building. Now, the defendant is about to learn what happens when a real-world contract meets a real-world judge. You see, Mr. Thorne, there is a fundamental difference between being an artist and being a parasite, I said, my voice cutting through the courtroom with the cold precision of a diamond-tipped blade. An artist creates something of value. A parasite consumes the value created by others and leaves nothing but a hollow shell behind. You have spent the last 6 months of your life acting as a leech, sucking the financial blood out of a woman who was kind enough to give you a place to live. And then you had the unmitigated gall to stand here and attempt to play the victim, because I am insisting that you pay back the money you stole. He stood there, mouth slightly agape, looking like a fish hooked and dragged onto the dock. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing panic as the realization finally hit him. He was not the smartest person in this room, and he was certainly not going to walk away from this with his lies intact. You have no evidence to support your claims of business expenses, I continued, ticking off the points on my fingers. You have no proof of your sick mother being the reason for your absence. You have no proof of these international brand deals. And you have absolutely no defense for the fact that you lived in Miss Place, Rodriguez's apartment, used her electricity, used her internet, and utilized her hard-earned income to fund your own personal music festival vacation. You are not a misunderstood visionary, Jason. You are, by the definition of the law, a breach of contract defendant who is currently about to have a judgment entered against him that will follow him for the rest of his professional life. There, I can get the money, he stammered, his voice weak and cracking. I just need a little time. If you just let me get back to work, I can. You have had enough time. I exploded, slamming my gavel down on the bench with a crack that made the entire gallery jump. You have had 6 months of time. You have had time to get a job, time to sell that leather jacket, time to pawn the equipment you bought with her money, and time to be an honest human being. You chose to waste every single second of that time on deception. I am done giving you time. I am giving you a debt that you are going to pay starting today. I turned my attention to Elena. She was standing tall now, the nervous energy replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who had finally seen the truth brought to light. Miss Rodriguez, I am entering a judgment in your favor for the full amount of $3,000, plus court costs and any interest allowed by law. If he fails to pay, you take this judgment to the sheriff, you have his wages garnished, and you make sure he understands exactly what professional viability looks like in a court of law. Elena nodded, a small, triumphant smile breaking through her exhaustion. Thank you, Judge. Thank you so much. I looked back at Thorne. He looked as if he'd been physically struck. And as for you, Mr. Thorne, I said, my tone deadly calm, I hope you enjoy your music festivals, because from this point on, you're going to be paying for them with the money you earn from a real job. You have just learned the most expensive lesson of your life. And frankly, based on your performance here today, I think you earned every bit of it. This is ruinous, he shrieked, his voice rising again in a desperate, final act of defiance. You're destroying my career. You're making it impossible for me to work. No, I countered, leaning forward until I was glaring directly into his eyes. I am simply ensuring that your career involves honesty. If your career requires lying, scamming, and stealing from your roommates to survive, then you don't have a career. You have a criminal enterprise. And if that enterprise is destroyed by having to pay your debts, then it wasn't a very good enterprise to begin with. I gestured to Bird. Get him out of my sight. I have a long day ahead of me, and I've wasted quite enough of it listening to his fairy tales. Bird stepped forward, his massive frame looming over Thorne like a storm cloud. You heard the judge, son. Time to go. Thorne didn't say another word. He didn't look at Elena. He didn't look at the cameras. He gathered his leather jacket, shoved his tablet into his bag, and practically ran toward the exit, tripping over his own heels in his hurry to escape the judgment of the court. He looked like a man who had just realized that the world wasn't a stage for his performance, but a place where actions have consequences. The heavy doors clicked shut behind him, sealing away the sound of his panic. The courtroom felt instantly cleaner, purged of the dishonesty that had been hanging in the air. Next case, I said, picking up the next file and straightening my robe. I felt a surge of satisfaction. It wasn't about the money, really. It was about the principle. People walk into this courtroom with these elaborate masks, these curated personalities, and these complex defensive fictions. They think they can perform their way out of reality. But reality has a way of catching up to them, and when it does, it usually walks through my front door. I looked at the next folder. Another dispute, another set of lies, another person who thought they were the exception to the rule. I smiled, a thin, sharp expression of anticipation. Let them come. I was ready. I always was. The courtroom door had barely clicked shut behind Mr. Thorne before the silence rushed back, in a silence that, to me, always feels like a blank canvas waiting for the next layer of human drama. My bailiff, Bird, looked over at me, A subtle, knowing grin etched onto his face. He knows as well as I do that the smell of desperation left behind by someone like Jason Thorne is unmistakable. It lingers, almost like cheap cologne that's been applied way too generously in an attempt to hide the fact that the wearer hasn't bathed in a week. That one had a real flair for the dramatic, didn't he, Judge? Bird muttered as he stepped back to his post. Flair is one way to put it, Bird, I replied, tossing the now empty file onto the completed pile. I'd call it a masterclass in deluded incompetence. He genuinely thought that if he just shouted his vision loud enough, the laws of basic arithmetic would simply cease to exist. It's almost impressive if it weren't so incredibly pathetic. I leaned back, feeling the familiar, stiff resistance of the judicial chair. My mind was already shedding the details of the Thorne case like a snake shedding its skin. There's no room for baggage in this room. Every case deserves a clean slate, a fresh pair of eyes, and a judge who hasn't been worn down by the stupidity that preceded it. The secret to this job, the secret to staying sharp after all these decades, is realizing that while the faces change, the motivation remains a constant dismal loop: greed, ego, and the desperate, flapping desire to never, ever be wrong. I looked at the clock on the wall. We were running perfectly on schedule. The machine of justice is precise, and I am the most precise part of it. I don't dawdle, I don't entertain sideshows, and I certainly don't let anyone dictate the tempo of my courtroom. If they want to perform, they can go to Broadway. If they want to lie, they can go to a political campaign. But if they want a ruling, they're going to get it from me, and they're going to get it fast. I reached for the next file, the paper crisp and untouched. There's a certain thrill in that first moment of opening a new folder. It's a puzzle, a little piece of someone else's mess that I have been invited to tidy up. Will this one be a straightforward case of bad math? A classic he said, she said that falls apart under the slightest cross-examination? Or will it be another one of those convoluted, high-stakes dramas where people treat their personal lives like a Shakespearean tragedy just to avoid admitting they were careless with a checkbook? Whatever it was, I was ready. I straightened my robe, checked the placement of my gavel, and smoothed back my hair. I don't do this for the applause, and I certainly don't do it for the accolades. I do it because someone has to be the adult in the room. Someone has to look at the Jason Thornes of the world and say, no, you don't get to treat people like that. No, you don't get to rewrite the rules. Yes, you have to pay. It's a duty, but it's a duty that carries its own kind of satisfaction. I thrive on the truth. I thrive on stripping away the layers of pretense until all that remains is the cold, hard fact of what actually happened. People think they can hide behind their personas, but they can't hide from me. Not for long. I looked over at Bird, who was watching the door with that patient. Unshakable vigilance. Are we ready to see who's next, Bird? Always ready, Judge, he said, giving a quick affirmative nod. I set my pen down and interlaced my fingers on the desk. My posture was perfect, my expression composed, my mind as clear as a bell. I was ready to listen, ready to dissect, and ready to deliver the kind of judgment that leaves no room for debate. The drama, the deceit, the desperate grasping for validation, it was all just noise. And I have a very low tolerance for noise. Let's bring them in, I said, my voice crisp and commanding. I settled into my seat, the embodiment of the law, waiting for the doors to open to reveal whatever new brand of foolishness was waiting on the other side. Let them come. I'm the firewall, and I'm standing my ground.